You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seat belts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal cast. Obviously, last week we touched on New Capenna and did our little financial trend episode about that. So this week we're actually going to reach back into the past because we did the same thing for Neon Dynasty.
Yes.
And what we actually want to do is say, hey, look, these were the things that we said would be good in Neon Dynasty, that were bad, that were whatever. Hey, let's see where they're at now. What did we miss? What did we get right?
Mm-hmm.
What were we just completely wrong about? And just go down the list and see how it is in hindsight.
Absolutely. And it's something we like to do because it basically kind of proves out the model, right? It talks to how we evaluate our cards and helps us continue to build our model and better serve both ourselves and our listeners when we review, and why would we keep that from people. So off the bat, we broke it down into three pretty big bullet points, and then we'll discuss the cards individually. The three bullet points are what we each got right, what we got wrong, and this is evaluating our specs, and then what we just straight missed. So to kick it off, what I got right was that all three picks that I made are fairly popular from Neo in regards to Commander, and fairly popular within their expected archetypes, all of which got increased visibility because of the push for the Enchantress themes, basically. The odd one out was Containment Construct, but that was more of a pick for Constructed. And that hasn't really picked up, but it is seeing play from Standard all the way down to Legacy, but in a very light amount. As far as Commander goes, it definitely sees a lot more play than I thought it would. So I just kind of lucked into that one. I lucked into being right on that.
But you were technically right, which is the best kind of right.
Yes.
I got Boseiju right. Right now, the jury is still out on Lion Sash and on AO. Actually, you know what? We'll get to AO in the next point. Lion Sash, I think I was mostly right on. Boseiju, the interesting thing is, while I said $35 was too high,
yep,
it's really not that much lower at about $25, $27 now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at a booth at a show, it is $35, which is the interesting thing that I think in the future we may want to touch on. We're specifically talking about, on TCG player.
Yes.
The interesting thing, and we both rewatched the episode, we said long term, we both thought Takanuma would be the best one for EDH. It is the second least expensive.
Hell yeah.
It's for now. It is still very underrated, and I got that right, at least. So I'll take it.
Yep. So what I got wrong was thinking that EDH staples would see movement immediately, but that's because of how right you were about how open this set would be. So yeah. This is the most open set in history. We know this now. WotC gave us those numbers, and continued opening is suppressing prices on a lot of these low-end cards.
Yeah.
Because there's just infinite supply. We'll continue to see movement, but it's going to take longer for supply to dry up. So what I got wrong was thinking that there would be faster movement on some of these than there initially were. I don't think I gave timelines on anything, but if I was going to predict, I probably would have said about 6 months. And I don't think that's going to be the case for cards like Brilliant Restoration and Kami of Transience.
Yeah. That was something that I also definitely got wrong, was, the timeline on this. I think, yes, you're right. It was the most open, which we thought would suppress prices. The interesting thing was that at SEG Pit this weekend, the booth I was at sold more Kamigawa collector boosters than New Capenna, which is wild.
Yeah, that's
because
crazy.
it was set release weekend, and it wasn't that we didn't have enough. We restocked on New Capenna. We just sold through a bunch of Kamigawa. The thing that I got wrong was, and this was something I kind of touched on in the episode but didn't go in depth on, the premium of Japanese cards from this set because of how accessible the collector boosters have been. I also got my Lion Sash price wrong. I said $5 was appropriate. Well, the market has spoken. $2.
Yep.
$2. Which speaks to your point, though. Some of the stuff we may not see movement on because of how opened this set was.
Yeah.
Which is a really odd thing because, obviously it was very opened. It was also the first set where we saw a supply that was on par with what we saw pre-pandemic.
Yes.
In terms of availability to your local game store and other, bigger guys.
Mm-hmm.
It was just very interesting to see, but I definitely got timeline wrong on everything just about.
Yeah. For me, the biggest takeaway was that when it came to picking cards to watch and to spec on, while I was correct on what to watch, I was wrong. I missed a number of possible specs by pushing for some of the lower end ones. I had Farewell on my spec list, but I did not think that it would be as good as it is because it's symmetrical, but all the content that I've seen since release has either wanted or needed Farewell and utilized it to great effect when it was there. And part of this was that because it was symmetrical and what it did, it seemed like kind of a worse merciless eviction, so I just kind of set it aside when I was putting together my list of cards to talk about for the episode and even spec on. I also missed Favor of the Mirror Breaker, another card on my list. I think it was 40 or 60 cents when I put it on my list. I have the number here in front of me. 30 cents. It was 30 cents when it was on my list. Super cheap. But I didn't think just another Kiki Jiki with a tax was going to be as pervasive as it became. But I think the miss on this was actually because it got pushed a bit due to constructed usage.
Yeah.
And I basically missed out on a 15x. From 30 cents to like $4 or $5. But what I absolutely just missed on overall, didn't even make my list, were Kodama of the West Tree and cards like Silver Fur Master. And those are wildly different. I don't know why I didn't see Kodama of the West Tree. After reading it again, I guess I thought that it didn't provide anything unique enough to warrant watching or specking on. It is just a bunch of similar effects stapled together in a fairly fragile fashion, being a creature and an enchantment. So I thought it unnecessary. But the lesson here is that redundancy is key for this type of effect, especially when on a creature with such a low mana value, that being 3. So it's great in the 99 and also as a commander. It kind of fights the Green God. Yeah. The original green god. I want to say Nissa, but that's a planeswalker. I can't think. Nylea.
Origin of Life's...
No, Nylea.
Oh, God, yeah.
The original Nylea gives your creatures trample, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it's fighting. Silver Fur Master, though, is a little more endemic of something else, and that's a blind spot for me for Yuriko decks and also Rat Tribal.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just never pay attention to Yuriko as far as EDH is concerned, so I miss the kind of like Draco Boom cards that you want for this deck. And also for me, Rat Tribal is just something I really don't care about, and I think that's solely because of the price hoodoobery around Maronar, and the fact that it was bought out and purposefully is kept out of the marketplace. And so for me, the Rat deck is basically just a non-starter because you can't get your hands on Maronar, so why even bother?
Yeah.
And those are my two key takeaways for things that I just absolutely missed on.
I think one of the biggest ones for me that I missed on that I plan to take as a lesson going forward, we actually have pretty good value on showcase cards. Now, granted, it could be the anime influence. There's lots of reasons that this could be the case.
Yep.
The thing is, regardless of that, man, the showcase cards in this set have so much value. This puts so much more pressure on the collector boosters and really does show that, like, look, if you are doing this for any value whatsoever, you need to be doing collector boosters. You just need to be doing that. You've got Borderless Boseiju at like $37, Phyrexian Jin Git at $27, the Showcase Jin Git at $27, Kaito Shizuki at like $30. And that's not even counting the foil etch. And then you have the Wandering Emperor Showcase at $80.
Emperors, there's two different arts for the Wandering Emperor.
Yeah, the Borderless is 35-ish.
Yep.
The Showcase is almost 100.
Mm-hmm.
That's ridiculous. There's no reason for that, but market's there.
It's something,
what are you gonna do?
Yep, it's something that it just keeps rearing up when they do these alt art treatments. We didn't really see it with the Godzilla stuff, but that is something we talked about a while ago, and then it moves forward, right? You go into the Dracula stuff. You've got the, I guess actually it wasn't the Godzilla stuff. It was the stained glass, not anime Lily.
Yeah,
that kind of proved a point, because prior to that it was the Japanese JSV Chandra dual deck, and that just didn't sell at all for a really long time. And now that we're getting these comic treatments, these anime treatments, they are just something you absolutely have to pay attention to in every set if you want to maximize the value of whatever product you're dealing with that you're cracking. If you want to hit your singles, because they all sell. I don't think it matters how good the card is. I think that all that matters is that it's the alt treatment and then it sells.
Yep. And that's something that's kind of borne out so far with what we've seen in Capenna. Is that, guess what? It sells.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what you're paying attention to, it's going to sell. And that's been, to me, one of the wildest things to watch, is to see this set more than any other shows. Collector boosters, showcase, variants matter, and that you can have multiple variants sell, because as we've been saying, it's hard to pick the one that works.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But take Odawara, for example. So looking at TCG right now, low listing on the normal version, $11. Low listing on the extended art normal version, $16. Low listing on the borderless non-foil, $18. Both of those versions are clearly selling. So maybe you don't have to pick one and go for it. Maybe I should start going wide on this stuff and just saying, hey, this one works, so I guess we'll just go with all of them. Who cares?
Yeah.
And that is just so different than what we've seen with any other set.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild to me. I'm happy to be here for it. I think it's great. But it's just fascinating to me to watch that and see it. And that was something I completely missed, because I have been so dismissive of collector boosters in general. So mea culpa on that one.
Yeah, there's also an amount of how good is the set and how good are the cards that matter.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
For a while through spoiler season, it seemed like Kamigawa might have been another clunker. Mm-hmm. So that really does make a difference. You can still find CBBs of AFR and the Innistrad sets. Even double feature isn't a CBB, but you can still find double feature fairly easily. Like GameStop seems close to liquidating their CBBs of all the aforementioned sets.
Yeah.
If you can find them. It seems very hit or miss, but also multiple art treatments. We're looking at 2 alt arts for Kamigawa and Streets, which I don't think was the case for the other sets. So that could also add another wrinkle to all of this. But
yeah, MH2 was the only other one, and that's, when I picked Ignoble Hierarch as an example, I was like, I don't know, I guess retro, because there's a sketch, there's the retro, there's the edge foil, non-foil, foil, like, it made it difficult.
Yeah.
And maybe that was me overthinking it. That's what Kamigawa taught me.
Fair enough. So to take a step back now and take a look at the individual cards, I'll start out first because I got my stuff up. The first one we can take a look at is Brilliant Restoration, and it's Brilliant Tumble down to 30 cents. And I wrote a note for this that basically cascades through the rest of the cards and is exactly what I got wrong. The note is just 3 words: Flat Fuck Friday, because that's what all my specs are right now. You're going to see it when I bring in the stocks graph. They're all just super flat, and it's not because they aren't popular. When you look at Rec and you look at the cards from Kamigawa that we're seeing, by Kami of Transience and Brilliant Restoration are towards the top of the set. So it's not like these cards aren't popular. So it's the fact that the set is just opened into infinity right now. It's just suppressing things. So really all that happened here is that Brilliant Restoration just picked up in popularity and is played exactly where I predicted, but did not turn out to be the spec I wanted it to be in the short term. I still believe in all of these specs, though. It just means that I now have to essentially glacier them for I don't know how long, 18 months, 16, 15 months, until the set goes out of print, maybe, and just glacier all 3 of these. So Brilliant Restoration takes that tumble, and I'm not even looking at the alt art. I still have it. I don't want to be upset by this. And it just ropes. But I don't think it's going down. We're not going to see a drop below 30 cents. That's, as close to bulk rare as you're going to get without it being like literal bulk.
Yeah.
So I think now is still a fine time to buy in if you want.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that's, similar to mine. Individual cards, AO I got wrong. I thought, and maybe this was timeline. Who knows? Maybe Brilliant Restoration in a year turns out to be the best card in the set. What's the thing we always say? There are no bad specs, just longer timelines.
Yes. Yeah. So when we're looking at AO and we're taking a look at the card itself, it's just a miss on?
I think it was just a miss on playability, honestly, especially looking at, like Junji. Man, that card is real good, and boy, did I undervalue that.
Yep.
Putting a non-dragon creature from the graveyard onto the battlefield. Non-dragon, I thought it was non-dragon, non-legendary.
Okay.
Boy, do I need to learn to read. I also think that each opponent discarding 2 cards is also very valuable.
Yep.
I think I just missed on the playability and the combo ability of AO.
Okay. Because
the other thing that I thought would be relevant was the ability for that card to combo. The 2 counters on each permanent you control that's a creature or vehicle may actually end up being the more relevant of the 2 because of a card like Giada's Gift.
Okay.
Where all of a sudden this matters.
Mm-hmm.
When I identified AO as like, this is going to be insane,
yep.
It was the first mode that I thought was good. I just think I missed on playability there.
Okay. Yeah. It was hard because they all looked pretty decent. The red one was the most immediately playable because it was already an infinite combo. All you needed was like Nim Death Man. We talked about it on the episode.
Yeah.
But if something else was just happened with AO or something similar where like there's a non-legendary clause on it.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was part of like a Greasefang EDH deck where somebody attempted to use the Entomb from MH2 to put a Parahelion in the graveyard.
Oops.
Yeah, exactly. Parahelion is legendary, and you can't do that without Entomb. It strictly says it.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. For Kami of Transience, this is basically the same thing as Brilliant Restoration. It takes that tumble, and then it ropes, but however, we are seeing a little more movement on the market price overall, albeit not great, and it's been dipping. However, it looks like it's coming back up. This card is not as popular as I hoped it would be, but it is being played in the decks that I expected it to be played in. So while Restoration is in like 5,000 decks right now, which is 4% of the amount of decks it could be in, Kami of Transience is only in 1.6 thousand decks, 1,600, and 1% of the 128,000 decks it could be in. But that's because it's mono green, so it's a little different. It's not considering the enchantment theme that basically has to play along with this.
Yeah.
But when you look at the generals that you expect to see it with, like here it is. This is, kind of like the greatest from Kamigawa hits, and then you hit into the top commanders otherwise, and it's Sithis, it's Sisay, it's Estrid. Like, these are very popular generals, and so I think this one is just going to take a little longer to really pick up for some of this stuff, because these decks, aside from Sithis, everything else has been around for a while, and sometimes people are just slow to adapt, slow to update their lists, and then resubmit back to rec. So I'm not too worried about that. And again, it makes it an easier pickup now. It's 29 cents when it was, what it released? 32?
Yeah.
So it's actually holding pretty well. Like,
my next one, and I think I had to rewatch the part where I was talking about Lion Slash a couple of times. So I did say long term, I think $5 to $10 is right for this card. I think now we're seeing, and this is actually something I've noticed with a lot of Kamigawa cards, you can get the basic foils for less than the non-foils.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because of collector boosters, et cetera, et cetera. But we're sitting at about $3 now for Lion Sash, which I think, as I said then, was about appropriate. This is not a $10 to $15 card ever, but it's in that 5 to 10 range probably in a little bit of time.
Yep.
We've seen the amount of playability. It's seen play in the decks that I called. It's, hey, it's scavenging ooze with upside, kind of.
Yeah.
Cool. I really don't know what else to say. I was just, this was one that I felt confident on, and I'm glad to see I was right, unlike AO.
I think Lion Sash is actually endemic of where you got unlucky with Lion Sash in the way I got lucky about Containment Construct, and that's between Kamigawa and Streets. Modern has changed a lot.
Boy, has it.
And Lion Sash has been powered down versus Containment Construct, which got a boost from Streets of New Capenna because of the new keyword mechanic for
Connive.
Connive, yeah.
Yep.
And that's not a saving grace of the card of Containment Construct. My next card, I think these two, each of our picks are just endemic of, one's best laid plans.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
We didn't know how things are going to change because we didn't know what was coming down the pipe in the next set.
Yeah.
So Lion Sash does get powered down. Although with Green-White Depths winning both Legacy 5Ks at SCG Pit, the same 75, the deck was played by one person. It was Roland Chang's deck, I think.
It was not Roland's deck. So Rodney was the one who won the second time.
Yeah.
And what happened was the guy wins the 5K. He did test with Roland, and they came up with the list together. So he wins with that 75. Rodney goes up to the guy 5 minutes after the event is over and says, "Hey, are you playing Sunday?" And he goes, "No." And Rodney says, "Can I borrow the deck?" So it's not just the exact same 75 list.
Yeah.
It's literally the same deck.
Yes. I saw the photo that Roland put out, so I thought it was Roland's deck. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's literally the same deck that won both events. It's Green and White Depths. It still plays out of the graveyard, so maybe there's an opportunity for a Lion Sash to pick up in Legacy because of that. Containment Construct, on the other hand, is slowed down because a lot of the odds and ends combos that people thought about utilizing it in for Legacy never really panned out. As expected, it was too dirtily to just go fish with that Fifth Dawn blue rare. So, like, go get LED, go get LED, go get LED, go get a pedal, make infinite mana, kill you somehow, because we need to go tutor it up. Memnarch you to death or something.
Yeah.
And instead, we got lucky on Containment Construct with a bunch of stuff from Streets. But at least with Containment Construct, what we're seeing is, aside from a rope on average. We're seeing the market dance around average, which means people are actually buying into this card for various reasons. And you take a look at Rec, and it's just like, okay, 5-6 generals from Streets, main set and Commander, as well as Kamigawa. And then what fits into a lot of decks in EDH that I really did not expect to happen. There's some stuff here that if I dug a little deeper I might have found, but I really didn't know that people were jamming Hazrat the Fervent as a general in EDH. Like, that was interesting to find out when I went back and looked at this card. So there's a lot of this stuff that I just didn't catch the first time around, and I kind of got lucky with because of it. But I never picked it for EDH. I did pick it as a constructed card, I believe, and that just has not materialized yet. I'll see if I can bring up decks, and we can see like a little bit very minimalist in every format. But here's Historic, Penny Dreadful, which is a Moto format, Legacy, in Auriok Salvager combo, like we would expect because that's LED based combo. Alchemy for some godforsaken reason. Modern in some brave soul is playing Hollow Vine still. Thank you. And then some odds and ends self-mill stuff in standard, so it gets a little bit of boost. Very minimal because of that, but I expected more.
Yeah. I think that's one of the more interesting things is seeing where this has seen play. Because you're right, Modern's changed a lot. But I'm hoping that Legacy and having paper events may cause a card like Lion Slash to go up. Mm-hmm. We'll see, though.
Yep.
Especially if, because the green-white Turbo Depths Turbo Decks list had been doing well for a while.
Yes. It was a very known quantity.
It was a very known quantity, and now all of a sudden we have paper events where it's doing well, which is drastically different than Moto, because Legacy, unlike Standard and to a lesser extent Modern, is not a format where you can just swap into a different deck. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot different. And I thought that was one of the interesting things to see is how that's going to impact paper prices now that we have these events.
Yep. And
we've seen power levels that affect Eternal formats recently, which is great.
Yeah, I think this is actually a good point to kind of harp on. So the Star City event is happening. There's 2 Legacy 5Ks that I believe are back-to-back. They're Friday, Saturday?
It was Friday, Sunday.
Friday, Sunday. Okay, then I don't know what happens Saturday at all. But there are Modern 5Ks Friday and Sunday. Now, the Friday event, and I've linked this I've talked about this in the Discord. The Friday event is very normal.
Yeah.
The top 16 looks very normal. People went off their fucking rocker on Sunday. Like,
it was
those
great.
deck lists are insane. There's like Rakdos Goblins. Again, another Brave Soul played Jund to a top 8 finish. And there's just some weird shit all the way down. Like the 4C Urion players just didn't come out. Cool.
Yep.
Now, what was going on behind the scenes was that there was some whack-ass shit going on Moto. And I forgot what card it was. Something popped-ish over the weekend because it just did a thing on Moto. And it was very difficult for me to even really want to digest what was happening on Moto because SCG Pit was such a big event for so many people that what was going on Moto felt like that the adage, when the cat's away, the mice will play. Like, all your sentinels of the Modern format that could have been at Pit were at Pit. So Moto also ran wild, like the Sunday Modern 5K.
Yeah.
And I think there is a little bit of conversation to be had about that when we have paper events going on at the same time as digital, and where one needs to focus when we're looking at this, because you could have wildly disparate formats when everybody is somewhere else, because Star City just decides to hold older format events on release weekends the same time that Moto is also running larger events that aren't just leagues.
Yeah.
And we get these weird like cycles and timings. And I don't think we've seen that in a very long time.
No, I don't think we have. Years, probably. I mean, obviously, they're at least 2 years.
Yeah, because WotC was also holding Grand Prix.
Yeah.
So they weren't going to dilute their premier events with digital stuff like that. You'd see mocks
Yeah.
and other odds and ends, but you wouldn't see other large events like, or at least people weren't considering them format warping at the time because WotC was still holding their own large top level events.
Yeah.
So, but moving on to the last card though, you wanted to go back. Or sorry, you mentioned up top that you want to talk about Boseiju.
Yes, Boseiju. So this is one that I think was very interesting because I did get it right. I did say 35 was too much for the card. And according to TCG, it is. Now, the reason I wanted to get back to this is because while 35 is too much for the card on TCG, it is the appropriate price at events. And that is because we have a $28 buy list in the room on occasion, courtesy of 95.
Ah, the photo you tweeted out from over the weekend.
Yes. So it's important to note that depending where you're at, the appropriate price can vary because obviously TCG is a completely different beast. We have in-person events again. They're happening with on a regular basis. We are getting them between Command Fest, Star Cities, and now the NRG circuit pretty consistently. So now all of a sudden these prices change a little bit because there's buy lists you have to be mindful of. And one of my favorite moments the last couple years was going to a Star City and another vendor was like, well, shit, 95 is here now. That means I have to compete with their buy list, which is the whole reason I started coming to Star Cities, that I didn't have to compete with their buy list.
Yeah.
Because you did at Grand Prix. And now
here they are.
They're on the Star City circuit. So now you have to compete with their buy list. So while, yes, I was correct that 35, at least in the short term, was too much for that card, it's only the correct price on TCG, not at events.
Yep. Yeah, so you have 95 who might be arbitraging out to Japan, and then you also still have like the captive audience thing, right?
Yeah,
people need
exactly.
This card for every format that's going to be held at a Star City event, so you can also just kind of pump your premium if you want. So
yeah,
there is that. But I think that's it for all the cards I had. That's everything you got?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So let's jump over to picks, and I'm going to go first this time because I don't know who went first last time.
It's been a minute. I don't remember.
Yeah. So for me, I went back to I don't want to say my roots, but here I am picking another big dumb green card in Vigor.
Yeah.
A card that I've been watching for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been on my list since late December of 2020. So, a year and 3 months. And at that time, CK was buying 20 copies at $4.25. There were 61 LP or better at $5.71 on TCG. Right now, CK, when I picked this card a couple weeks ago, CK was buying 22 at $7.50, and they were buying 5 set foil at $19. They are now buying 16 at $8. So quantity went down, price went up in between. However, the foil numbers are still the same, and I kind of expect it to stay that way. Lorwyn foils do sit pretty flat, but as far as this card is concerned, I don't think it really is a card you want to pimp. It just doesn't strike me like that. You want it because you want it because of what it does.
Yeah.
So overall, where does a card like Vigor sit in EDH? Basically sits in your Fatty Boom Booms deck, and it's high interaction with a decent swath of new cards like Kadama of the West Tree and Vorinclex Monstrous Raider, because it's adding counters to things, which just continues to benefit from newer cards that get printed.
Yeah.
WotC likes putting counters on stuff. Here we are. Even something like Falco, which was just released, but not when I wrote this up, allows you to do some really weird things with your counters, namely casting cards off the top. And Vigor just kind of pumps up that strategy. So, as far as the format is concerned, looking at Commander, holistically prior to New Capenna, this is a house and decks that just want to turn creatures sideways and end the game that way. between existing synergies and the consistent stream of outstanding green threats we receive year after year, there's always a home for this card in decks that just want to attack. This grows any army to monstrous proportions, and as such, doesn't just go in big chungus deck, but it can be the all-star in smaller and middling-sized creature bases to create a formidable board quickly. This isn't a foundational card by any means, but it is a solid role player in combat deck that anyone can take advantage of. And yes, there are a number of combos that revolve around Vigor, but none that are a true value proposition for a deck, and usually one that just slots into the existing deck. So what I mean by that, because this is really the first time we've had a card pop up like this, is when you look at Vigor and you see, okay, so a Vigor is, if damage would be dealt to a creature you control other than Vigor, prevent that damage and put a +1/+1 counter on that creature for each 1 damage prevented this way. Well, you can do some really dumb things with Walking Ballista and Hardened Scales, or Atali and Mirror Entity, Polychronos Unchained, Crystalline Crawler, and the list just goes on and on and on of what you can do with Vigor, but that's not why we're here. A lot of that, again, is just kind of slots in. It's not what you want to be doing with Vigor mainly. As far as timeline goes, I'll bring back stocks up for this because it's very important. So we can see Vigor, it usually gains, then plateaus for a while before a rise.
Yeah.
Due to the printing of a new card, and right now we're on the way back up. So I would expect to be able to out this card in the next 6 months if we buy in now, as the market is trending upward. And I'll zoom in so we can see that. Boop. But after that, barring a new printing in Brothers War or Dominaria, I would expect a solid exit to buy a list in about a year, because it will plateau. That's all this card does. It rises and plateaus until it's reprinted in Battle Bond, then it craters.
Yep.
So we could have bought in prior to call time. That's the second spike that you saw on stocks because of Vorinclex. We could have bought into that bump and have made a decent margin to buy a list, but prior to that bump, again, we saw a tumble from the Battle Bond reprint, unlike any we had seen before. So instead of making the call to buy in earlier, I wanted to ensure that any growth would reset the floor instead of tail off. And that's where we are right now. We're looking at it now after that vertical spike has retraced a bit, and now we're in the plateau, moving upwards slightly. That's why it sat on my list for a year, and we missed the $5 price tag. We're buying it at almost double. I do believe in this. Reprint equity on the Lauren Elementals, that's proven to be extremely low for a number of reasons.
Yep.
So they could be too expensive financially. They could be too expensive from a mana value standpoint, and not impactful enough to supplemental draft environments, or just too costly to introduce into certain draft environments. And this also goes for most of the Commander products. Some of them do too much, some of them do too little, some of them cost too much, some of them just are nothing. And I think the last one we saw was the 5-color one in Modern Horizons 2 prior to the Battle Bond reprint. The 5-color, not End of Hostilities. Maybe it was End of Hostilities.
I think it was.
Yeah, I think that's the name of it. So, because these elementals are all over the place, these are things like Guile, which has seen a reprint once or twice. Dread, a weird bug-looking thing. These do get reprints from time to time, but they just always fall flat, and I think WotC's finally really learned a lesson. Battle Bond was forever ago, and I really don't think we're going to see some of these large creatures again in supplemental sets, let alone in Commander stuff, because they're so pointed. They have so many colored pips in them.
I think the really interesting thing about Vigor in terms of reprints, and this is something that I've kind of been suspicious about for a while. It is on the mystery booster list, right? On the convention one. The thing is that slowly leaks product out because we do get mystery booster drafts every weekend. There's a Command Fest or a Star City. But it's not enough to affect the price. It's also enough that I think they don't need a large-scale reprint, because until it gets to like $40-50, they'll just say, hey, it's in the mystery boosters. We've still got those things going to events. We don't need to reprint this card because it's still actively in the market.
Yes.
People can pull it. So it's in a very interesting spot in terms of reprint equity, where I really don't think, because of the existence of mystery boosters, even outside of the playability or lack of reprintability or impact, that they would consider reprinting it in a large print format. And that's something that I've been fascinated about with the mystery booster cards. Especially now, they had the list. Another prime example is Rhystic Study. Rhystic Study's not on the list anymore because the list is only rares and mythics. So the mystery booster puts it in this weird spot of like, we don't need to reprint it until it gets outlandish. And there's a lot of room to grow, as we know, between a $10 price tag and a WotC saying this price is outlandish, let's reprint it.
And I think it also patches up some of the problems with putting cards like this into draft environments, where it just, you have to work the draft environment around it to make sure it's castable, or it has to be impactful in some way in the draft environment. You can't just have cards that are solely unplayable or they're just because they're reprinted. It definitely kind of patches all of that up. And I think another good example is Ancient Tomb. That was, I think it's still on the list.
It is.
So it's added for Kamigawa. And you can't, it is a card that could be reprinted in a supplemental set, but they can't do that in a draftable set that isn't mystery boosters because it just warps everything. But that's the whole point of mystery boosters, is everything all the time that's also nothing. And because it's forever large, the set. And so they don't have to worry about what kind of degeneracy does and does not happen when these cards are opened, or whether or not something is playable in any given draft. Because at the end of the day, there might be a color combination that's just wholly unplayable, but you have a banger card floating around the pool for it. It's just unsupported because mystery boosters. That's just how it works. But on the way out of the Vigor pick, for buy quantity, this one was kind of difficult for me to suss out. Like, if we're moving the buy list, you'd think you want to buy a lot, but buy quantity is always low. That it is perennially low. This has been on my list for, like, I was counting out, like, almost 15 months now. And the highest we ever got was 22, not too long ago. So I'm thinking 8 might be the play, because that's still a decent amount to own to send to buy list, and also keep in a binder as, just trade candy. Not a lot of people see Lorwyn Elementals much anymore. They just don't exist in binders. Some of them are absolute garbage. Like, I can't even tell you what the red one is, but I'm like 85% it's garbage, and like 93% the white one is trash. And there's a difference.
Hostility is what it's called. I was going to say Fury, but I'm like, no, that's the good one. Wow, yeah, nope. Hostility's actual trash. Never mind. Ignore.
I think those are just poop. Yeah. And so they just don't exist in binders anymore. A lot of the players from then kind of attritioned away from the game. These don't appear in cases anymore. So when it's in a binder, there's a bit of kind of mystique around there. There's like this card that does a lot for a lot of people that they just don't normally see. And so I think it's easy to move and highly liquid in that regard. But like I said, 8 isn't really based on the amount of money I want to put into this. I'd be happy to put more money into this if I knew I could move more copies with more regularity. Yeah. So if buy lists were to ever tick up, cool. I'd be there all day long for a higher quantity. But because it's perennially low, I can't. I just can't, in good conscience, say I pick up more than these. And to that end, right now, I think I have a a copy, maybe 2 from buying collections. It's just not a card I've been able to pick up on my own, but that's where I would be happy to be overall, is if I could get my grubby little hands on 8, then I absolutely would.
Yeah. I think it's really good, especially with the reprint equity being so low, I think because of the mystery boosters. Yep. And it is easily, like you said, the most impactful of, probably the only impactful card in what is a wildly mediocre cycle.
It used to be Guile, because of Constructed. You could go infinite with Guile, counter your own spells.
Yeah. It was, yes, you are absolutely correct.
But
I just don't know that it's still any good.
No, it is not. It costs too much from a mana value standpoint, and it does too little. So that basically, I think Dread might do something interesting. It gives your creatures Death Touch, maybe, but that's
it. Something like that. Yeah, but no, that's solid. My pick, again, returning to my roots of red enchantments with too many words on them, was something that I was going to identify if we had enough time in our new Capenna set review, and that is Arcane Bombardment. This card has been, and I think I was incorrect in saying that this was another, and thinking this was another Yogg-Will. This is a card that, to me, is something you use to bridge the gap between casual EDH and being a little bit more competitive. Ben put out his, Setly article, annual article, I don't know what you want to call it, of, hey, here's what I think about these cards. And he said, you know what? $3 range is probably appropriate for this card. And I agree short term. Mm-hmm. However, the trend we've noticed with sets going back to Kaladesh was that your cards that are identified as EDH All-Stars do not wait to start going up now. And we are now at the point where Arcane Bombardment has kind of hit its floor almost. We see a constant downward trend, and it's starting to recover a little bit. So taking a look at the stocks graph, just look at low, for example. So the all-time low was $3 on May 1st. It's done nothing but go up since. Granted, it's only 4 days, but we're already kind of seeing, all right, we're trending up even though we're getting more of this product opened. It was obviously a race to the bottom on set release. That's fine. The fact that it's already starting to recover, to me, is good for the long-term growth of the card, because we are, again, sitting at about $3 for this. Card's insane in EDH.
Oh, yeah.
This is something that I could see maybe not on par with Panharmonicon, just because Panharmonicon is colorless. Yep. And this is something that goes in Spells Matter decks. But something we've been touching on repeatedly, Spells Matters decks are something that Wizards seems to care a whole lot about lately. Yes. Taking a look at EDH Rec, top 3 commanders, Veyran, Spells Matter, Kalamax, Spells Matter, Kess, Spells Matter. All of it is Spells Matter stuff. And it happens to be in one of the 2 colors that are in just about every Spells Matter deck in blue and red. Now, it's a shame that Lutri isn't legal in the format, because if it was, I think this card takes off much, much faster.
Yeah.
So what are we looking at in terms of quantity and timeline here? Well, in terms of quantity, I personally have literally acquired 30 copies of this card since the set released, because this card's insane, and I'm an idiot who's sitting on 600 plus copies of Sarkhan's Unsealing.
Gotta do what you gotta do, man.
I would say generally I'd be comfortable with around 10 of this. And that's because, okay, at 10, I have a comfortable quantity that I can buy list if the time hits. I also have a comfortable quantity that I can trade out if I need to and buy list the rest, which is a really good spot to be in if you don't want to park more than $30, $40 in a card, which I think is reasonable. Timeline-wise, again, we'll go back to Panharmonicon. This is something that saw a little bit of a spike about 3-4 months after the set came out, and then just started gradually increasing. So in terms of an uptick, I'd say probably around 3 to 5 months.
Okay.
let's remember, in 3 to 5 months, we're going to have Commander Legends 2. We're going to have Dominaria.
It's Dominaria.
Is it Dominaria? Okay, yeah, Return to Dominaria. Which Dominaria, when it was released, was one of the most open sets ever. And we have Commander Legends 2. Why do I mention this? Because I think that means we see less streets opened during those times. Sure, the triomes exist. Awesome. Love to see it. People will continue to open for that product. But I don't think they're going to open it as much as they have Kamigawa, as they will Commander Legends 2, as they will Dominaria. Because I think Dominaria is one of those sets that just universally gets people excited. Old, new, doesn't matter when they played. They love it. And I think that's really where things are going to take off.
Okay.
So I'd say about 3 to 5 months before we start to see this card be able to be profitably buy listed.
Okay.
So
I feel like 3 to 5 might be short selling it. Like, we talked earlier about the bridge from casual to competitive EDH, and it feels like right now this card exists exactly in that spot, because again, you take a look at Rex and you see Veyron, Calamax, and Kess, and at least Calamax and Kess definitely can be built in a very aggressive way. You can definitely take over the table pretty quickly with both of these decks.
Yeah.
And they can do wildly different things. But it might take people less time to figure out how to make Arcane Bombardment work with these 3 generals in a truly casual setting than 3 months. And if that happens, then I expect it to actually move a little faster. There could be some trepidation right now of this is just too oppressive, but not in like the same kind of way Punisher cards get pumped very quickly. This might just be people holding off and seeing like, okay, this card, I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, so I'll buy the rest of my staples, and then I'll circle back around when I see something that really piques my interest, something that inspires me. Or if I was going to continue to be adding to my Calamax deck, like the one that I personally play, Arcane Bombardment wouldn't be the first card. It would be something bigger and dumber that does not allow me to take over the table as easily. But
that's fair.
I think 3 to 5 is fairly conservative for this. That's the only thing I'll argue on, is that I think we might actually see returns faster than 3 to 5. Otherwise, I agree with everything else. I think
I would not be mad if it takes a shorter period of time.
No, not at all. It's just I have a different valuation on timeline based on what we're seeing from Rec and like the decks that come along with it. It also doesn't seem like it's sparked a lot of interest right now in people to build new stuff. I think people are really interested in the new keywords and the new generals. The new decks that came out are fairly powerful. It's easy to slot new stuff in. They reprinted some old cards that kind of just needed a glow up, like Jaleva, the Bant Angel that just puts +1/+1 counters on itself. And I think there's a focus on that right now. So once people become inspired with the old in Calamax and Kess, then we'll see that. And I think that could be sooner than 3 months. Not to say that people get tired or worn out of their new commander deck, and if they're going to play Falco in that deck, or the Grixis general the Grixis legend that shouldn't be a general, not the vampire one. The one that's better is a sneak attack.
Yes, Xander.
Like, people are going to try that one. Like, once some of that experimentation gets done and that wears thin, then people will move on. And I think Bombardment is where people are going to go after that. So I like it. I think it's a good pickup in the short term, and I think it's going to be a good short to midterm hold. Yeah. I'd be very surprised if this did anything in Constructed.
Yeah, this is a purely EDH. If it sees play in Constructed, it's literally going to be in Ruby Storm in
It has to be like a one of too.
in Legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it has to be a one of.
Because
Exactly.
it's not Pyromancer's Ascension and it's not Paths and Flames. It creates
Yep.
like two separate piles, which is what happens when you cast Paths and Flames more than once, and it becomes really awkward to track. So, otherwise, yeah, I like the pick overall, and it's something that a lot of people were so hyper focused on when it was spoiled and then moved past that I think this is also another really good look because of that. When people come back, they'll remember, like Pepperidge
for
Farms.
sure. Yeah, Pepperidge Farms remembers.
So, unless you got anything else you want to talk about, I think that's going to be it for this week.
Let's do it.
So we are at MTG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube. You can find the podcast anywhere where you can listen to the podcast. The video version is up on our YouTube channel. If you want to reach out to us directly, that's MTG Cabalcast on Twitter. If you want to reach out to me, I am at Halt, I am Reptar on Twitter. You are
At Thirsty
We'll see
Sizzler.
you next week.